He gave Himself in the midst of our ungodliness. In casting His eye over our race, He did not say, "Here and there I see spirits of nobler mold, pure, truthful, truth-seeking, brave, disinterested, and just, and therefore, because of these choice ones, I will die for this fallen race." No, but looking on them all, He whose judgment is infallible returned this verdict: "They are all gone out of the way, they are altogether become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one." Putting them down at that estimate and nothing better, Christ died for them. That's amazing. Jesus viewed us as we really were, not as our pride fancies be. He saw us to be without God, enemies to our own Creator, dead in trespasses and sin, corrupt and set on mischief, and even in our occasional cry for good, searching for it with blinded judgment and prejudiced heart, so that we put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. He saw that in us was no good thing, but every possible evil, so that we were lost, utterly helpless, hopelessly lost apart from Him, yet viewing us as in that graceless and godless plight and condition, He died for us. So can we doubt His love? Should we doubt His love? Putting all these things into one, man by nature, where Christ finds him, is utterly void of strength of every sort of anything that is good, at least anything which is good in God's sight and is acceptable unto God. He has no strength of his own at all. He is without strength, and there he lies, hopeless, helpless, ruined and undone, utterly destroyed, a splendid palace all in ruin, through whose broken walls sweep desolate winds with fearful wailings, where beasts of evil name and birds of foulest wing do haunt, a place majestic even in ruins, but still utterly ruined and quite incapable of self-restoration, without strength, alas, alas, poor humanity. And yet Christ died. Then let it be noticed, and this is the point I want constantly to keep before your view, that Jesus died out of pure pity. He loves. And He's still pitiful. Pitiful in the sense of having pity upon us. But look at this. We revel in this type of love of Christ for the unreconciled sinner, and then once we become reconciled, we begin to doubt His love. It's as though we begin by faith, but try to finish out our salvation by works. Galatian heresy. Well, I'm saved now, I ought to know better, and so, when I do fall, it's different now. Oh, really? If it was different now, you'd lose your salvation. The same love that loved you when you were a wretched beast loves you now as a son. And although you do have responsibility put upon you as one who has received much, salvation does not lessen the pity and grace of God toward a man. But we seem to believe it does. Well, now I ought to know better. Well, you should have known better back then too. Salvation does not, when you become a child of God, it does not lessen God's grace toward you. He must have died out of the most gratuitous benevolence to the undeserving, because the character of those for whom He died could not have attracted Him, but must have been repulsive to His holy soul. The impious, the godless, can Christ love these for their character? No. He loved them notwithstanding their offenses, loved them as creatures fallen and miserable, loved them according to the multitude of His loving kindnesses and tender mercies, from pity and not from admiration. Viewing them as ungodly, yet He loved them. This is extraordinary love. I do not wonder that some persons are loved by others, for they wear a potent charm in their countenances. Their ways are winsome, and their characters charm you into affection. But God commended His love, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He looked at us, and there was not a solitary beauty spot upon us. We were covered with wounds and bruises and putrefying sores, distortions, defilements, and pollutions. And yet, for all that, Jesus loved us. He loved us because He would love us, because His heart was full of pity, and He could not let us perish. Pity moved Him to seek the most needy objects, that His love might display its utmost ability in lifting men from the lowest degradation and putting them in the highest position of holiness and honor. Now, we don't like this as a people. And let me just explain to you something. I'm going to use the Jesus film as an example. The tax collector, Matthew. If you look on the Jesus film, taxes are being collected. And Matthew's sitting there before he meets Jesus, tax collector, but he seems, there's a goodness about him. And when the old woman comes, who has no money to pay her taxes, she kind of goes like this, like she's going to pay, and Matthew kind of waves her on. Just go on, go on. You don't have to pay anything. And it seems to me they're demonstrating that Matthew was of sort of a different sort from the other tax collectors. He was a good fellow. No, not at all. That's not true. It's as though Jesus looked into Matthew and, well, there's a good guy. He's a tax collector, yes, he's done that and that's bad, but you can tell that he really does care about people. That's a lie. That's a lie. And if you look at the apostles, when He calls them, when they're fishing or whatever, they just seem like good guys. No. That's not true. It's not true. Let's go on. Page 41. The measure of Christ's love is that He gave Himself for us. There can be no greater expression or illustration of love than this. Now we'll look at some of the scriptures that teach of the greatness of the love manifested in the person of Jesus Christ. Let's go to John 15:13.